The idea of who will fight and defeat Fleet Admiral Akainu has been a pretty hot discussion in the community for a while now. And honestly, there is a multitude of factors and semantics that go into this discussion, such as how the final arc of One Piece will be structured, and which factions exactly will be involved. Will Blackbeard be there? What exactly is required of Luffy to achieve his dream? Will the Straw Hats even be involved in the conquest of taking down the world government? Will Luffy also have to fight against Imu, who appears to be being built up as a classic endgame shonen villain? Or is Imu just maybe a political figure with very important and vast knowledge? I think Oda has given us somewhat of a blueprint for how the endgame of One Piece will unfold, but there's still a lot of ways in which Oda can choose to deliver it. One thing that is pretty unanimous though, is that the task of taking down Fleet Admiral Akainu will either be presented to Monkey D. Luffy or his brother Sabo. And if you do enjoy these type of power scaling and character analysis discussions, I would really appreciate it if you would consider subbing to the channel. These are some of my favorite type of videos to make. But for this video, I'll be presenting both arguments for Luffy and Sabo, then bringing you guys some possible scenarios in which these fights can take place. Okay, let's start with Luffy, the man himself, and the first reason I'm going to bring up is a very simple reason, but a very valid reason, and it's the fact that Luffy is the main character. Wow, I know, so insightful, right? He is more likely to be put in a position to take down a main antagonist because he's a main character and Sabo is a side character. I know it's a very simple reason, but Oda doesn't really like to draw prolonged fights to begin with, and usually if he does, it's for his main cast members. Now of course there are certain examples that have given these side characters fleshed out fights when there is a narrative to do so, like Kyros against Diamante on Dressrosa, like Law against Virgo on Punk Hazard. And I know Sabo can definitely fall under this category, which I'll get to later in the video, but I'm just saying the main point is that Luffy is a main character, so he's more likely to be in position to do so. It's as simple as that. And of course we know Luffy wants to become the Pirate King, right? He wants absolute freedom. And he's even stated before that he wants to take down the Yonkos and the Admiral. Now, does that mean he has to take down every single Admiral, every single Yonko? No, I don't believe that's the case. But being the main character, I think it's pretty clear that Luffy will take down most of them. Like at the end of the series, if we had a chart of who took down the most Yonkos and Admirals, Luffy would lead the list. I'm pretty confident in that. But given the fact that Akainu is the Fleet Admiral, he is the main antagonistic force of the Marines, and the fact that Luffy really cares about the type of person you are, and Sakazuki is somebody who has very opposite ideals to Luffy, right? Luffy is never going to fight Fujitora, like in a serious fight. We all know that's never going to happen. But Akainu represents absolute justice, whereas Luffy represents absolute freedom. Akainu has a very black and white mentality on the world. Pirates are scum, there's no other way around it, even if it means unnecessarily losing his own comrades or killing innocent civilians. He will carry out this absolute justice. Whereas Luffy is different. He doesn't care about your status, your ethnicity, your background. He judges every person and every situation differently. So thematically speaking, this absolute justice versus absolute freedom could very well be the climactic battle of the series. And of course, one of the biggest reasons why people want this fight is because Fire Fist Ace, Luffy's brother, died in his arms at the hands of Akainu. And the fact that Luffy was there, the fact that he endured so much pain, so much trauma due to this loss is why people think that he's the only worthy candidate to fight Akainu. And I can totally understand this mindset, right? It might feel a little bit cheap for Sabo to get this revenge win because he wasn't there. Even though he is a brother to Ace just like Luffy, he physically wasn't there. So despite also feeling immense pain and guilt because of what happened, it still doesn't compare to what Luffy went through. Another thing we have to look at from the Akainu situation is that he gave Luffy his biggest scar. A permanent ass scar right across the chest that's also become pretty iconic in Luffy's character design. Could Oda be telling us something by this decision? We know how much he likes to emphasize the importance of visual scars. When Shanks met with Whitebeard, he emphasized how the only scar that actually aches right now is the one he received from Marshall D. Teach, Blackbeard. Somebody, as we all know, is very connected to Shanks going all the way back to their days as apprentices, and very likely a matchup we'll see down the line. Let's look at Kaido's only visible scar, the one he got from Odin. He questioned why the scar was hurting when the Skybirds were attacking him, obviously triggering PTSD from his fight with Odin, which is arguably Kaido's most important fight narratively so far. Luffy in Fishman Island, upon hearing Akainu won the position of Fleet Admiral, is seen throbbing, very similar to the other two I just mentioned. And finally, let's look at Zoro's scar that he received from Mihawk. Unlike the other three, he's never seen throbbing or aching because there's no real animosity for his opponent, but what the scar does represent is the reality check he received. I guess you could say something to keep him motivated, keep him fixated on his goal, representing the final obstacle that he needs to overcome in order to become the world's greatest swordsman. And I get the feeling this may be a way Oda is telling us Akainu is the final adversary for Luffy. Okay, now it's time to talk about the case for Sabo before I give you guys my final conclusion overall. And just like Luffy, people like the idea of Sabo avenging Ace. And like I mentioned earlier, Sabo wasn't there to witness the tragedy firsthand, but he was still deeply affected by it. Reading the newspaper is what triggered his memories back and resulted in him having a panic attack. So some people believe that based on this, Sabo, who couldn't save his brother at Marineford, should be the one to bring down Akainu in the final war. But I am personally not a fan of that argument because, like I said earlier, I think Luffy, as far as the revenge factor and the trauma factor, being there firsthand is way more convincing. So let's take a look at some other arguments. Sabo inherited the Mera Mera no Mi on Dressrosa. And to me, that's when these debates started to spark, right? Sabo inheriting Ace's power, defeating Akainu with that same power that he lost with, not to mention it's poetic because Magma in One Piece canonically has an advantage over Fire. Akainu has a better Devil Fruit. And although I do agree that from a matchup standpoint this would be poetic, people have also tried to push the, well, Sabo inherited his will. And I kind of have to disagree with that. I don't think it's an exact example of inherited will, more so than just being a schematic choice for Luffy's brother, making sure the Mera Mera no Mi ends up in the correct hands as a memento for Ace. When you're inheriting someone's will, I believe you need a similar ideology and similar goals. At one point that was the case. All three brothers desired that ultimate freedom through whatever means. In Ace's case, he wanted the ultimate freedom by creating a name for himself, to keep on winning and defeating strong opponents, to be so famous that he'd prove his own self-worth. He wanted to create an amazing legacy that proved all the haters wrong, all the haters who said somebody like him does not deserve to live in the first place. And this insecurity he had from being the son of Roger was very justifiable. But when he learned about the culture of the Whitebeard pirates, he found a home, a true family, and focused his efforts on making Whitebeard the greatest pirate ever. And in Sabo's case, he was obviously saved by a dragon when he was attacked by the Celestial Dragon, and eventually adopted the same goals and ideology as Monkey D. Dragon, to overthrow the Celestial Dragon system, which makes sense since he witnessed the cruelty and corruption of nobility firsthand growing up. But the point is, I don't believe that Sabo is necessarily inheriting Ace's will with the Mera Mera no Mi, since their characters as adults are fundamentally different, striving to accomplish different things. It's not like Zoro and Kuina where he inherited Wado Ichimoji to become the world's strongest swordsman. It's not like Luffy and Roger where he inherited the hat from Shanks and is striving to become the king like Roger and presumably do what Roger could not do 25 years ago. What Sabo for sure wants to do though is be able to protect Luffy at all costs, to be able to be there for Luffy the way he couldn't be there for Ace. And like I said at the beginning of the video, these final matchups will also be heavily depicted on the story structure Oda chooses. We're still pretty far away from when this matchup would actually occur, so it's a lot harder to predict which factions will exactly be involved in the exact order in which the antagonist will be defeated. I still do believe at this moment that Akainu is the final antagonist for Luffy, but it would be close-minded of me to say that that's the only route in which Oda can go. With threats like Blackbeard and Imu also being there, they could very well be bigger focuses for Luffy at that time. So let's say Blackbeard is not defeated at Raftel, or he somehow comes back for the final war. Are you telling me Luffy would have to defeat both Akainu and Teach in the final war? I seriously doubt that considering how many strong allies Luffy has, and that includes his brother Sabo. And to me, that's one of the best qualities of being the Pirate King, is the ability to recruit ridiculously strong individuals to help fight for you. Another point I hear a lot for the story structure argument is that some people say they prefer the endgame to be pirates versus pirates and revolutionaries versus the world government, right? Straw Hats versus Blackbeards, the final task for becoming the Pirate King. Revolutionaries are trying to overthrow the world government and specifically end the Celestial Dragon system, so I can kind of understand this. There so happens to be 5 revolutionary commanders if you include Ivankov, and then there's 5 elders for them to be matched up against, the 5 highest ranking Celestial Dragons. There happens to be 2 guys who stand above both groups, Monkey D. Dragon, the commander of the revolutionaries, and Imu, who stands as the king of the world essentially. Then that would grant Sabo the task of defeating the leader of the Marines, which is Fleet Admiral Akainu. And if Sabo doesn't fight against Akainu, it kind of makes you think, well, what's the point of his character? Is he not going to get a single good fight? What other fight narratively makes sense for Sabo in the slightest bit? And, you know, I kind of understand that, but at the same time, it might just be a pill we have to swallow. I cannot see Oda leaving out his main character Luffy in the battle against the world government. Especially if you consider that Luffy is going to do what Roger could not do with all the information on Raftel. He's going to be the one who completely changes the world upside down. I don't see a single scenario in which Luffy is left out of this battle. And presumably, this battle will likely be the final war that we've all been speaking of, right? The biggest war we've ever seen in the history of One Piece. So again, my conclusion at this point is that Luffy will fight against Akainu and not Sabo. I think he's the final antagonist at this point, but I'm not 100% sold because there is a multitude of factors when it comes to the story structure and how these final arcs will be unfolded. If Blackbeard is still alive at this point, if he comes to Marijois and is seeking something, whatever that may be, I think he's going to have to fight against Luffy. I think whether this is round 2 from Raftel or whatever this may be, that he will be Luffy's focus if he comes, and that would pretty much guarantee Sabo versus Akainu. And if Luffy is the one to fight Akainu, I think you can still give Sabo a pretty decent fight, maybe against Rob Lucci. I know that wouldn't be quite as compelling, but you know, it's just a pill we might have to swallow, man. Sabo is a side character, he's not a main cast member. So I wouldn't get my expectations astronomically high, but there's always a chance. And that's going to do it for me today. I appreciate you guys taking the time to listen. Let me know if you guys have any other counter arguments as to why Sabo should fight Akainu over Luffy, or if you agree with me on why Luffy is going to be the one to take down the Fleet Admiral. I'd also really appreciate if you guys would consider subbing to the channel. I like to do these power scaling and character analysis videos a lot. So if those kind of discussions intrigue you, hit that subscribe button for me. I'm Jagan, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.